Ladies and gentlemen, today is not just another day. It is a crossroads, a moment where the size of your thinking will determine the size of your future in a world that constantly shouts limitations. The real magic, the kind that transforms careers, rewrites destinies, and builds legacies, belongs to those who dare to think bigger than their circumstances, louder than their fears, and further than their past. The truth is simple. Most people don't fail because they lack talent, resources, or opportunity. They fail because they think too small. They underestimate their own capacity. They choose comfort over courage. But the people who rise, the people who break barriers, the people who change the game, they think big first, long before the world ever believes in them. Today, I'm asking you for one thing. Stop shrinking your dreams to fit your reality. Expand your reality to fit your dreams. Because the magic of thinking big isn't fantasy. It's fuel. It activates action. It multiplies possibilities, and it turns ordinary people into forces that cannot be ignored. Fear is often the first signal that we are finally standing at the threshold of real growth, especially for men who have been conditioned to appear unshakable. Men are taught to stay in control, to maintain an image of certainty, and to avoid anything that exposes vulnerability. But the irony is powerful. The very dreams that could elevate their lives demand that they step into the unknown, where control is minimal and courage is mandatory. Thinking bold enough to scare yourself forces you to confront the limits you've quietly accepted for years, the ceilings you didn't know you built, and the parts of yourself you've avoided because they challenge your identity. Women often see the potential in men long before men see it in themselves. Not because men lack ambition, but because fear disguises itself as logic, responsibility, or timing. When a man thinks bigger than his comfort zone, it doesn't just change his life, it alters how others experience him. Bold thinking creates a presence that is felt, a direction that is clear, and a confidence that is earned through action rather than appearance. The fear that rises when you imagine something truly massive is not a warning to stop. It is confirmation that you finally stumbled onto something worthy of your potential. A man's destiny is shaped long before any action is taken, because the mindset he carries determines which doors he opens and which ones he never even walks toward. Men often underestimate how much their inner dialogue influences the risks they take, the standards they adopt, and the identity they grow into. When a man believes he is capable, worthy, and built for more, he approaches challenges as opportunities rather than threats. When he believes he is limited, he shrinks his world to match the size of his doubt. The gatekeeper is never the obstacle. It is always the mindset standing in front of it. From a woman's perspective, the power of a man's mindset is often visible in ways he himself overlooks. Women notice how he carries himself, how he speaks about the future, and whether he leads from conviction or insecurity. They see how a man's internal beliefs either elevate him or quietly sabotage his potential. A strong, expansive mindset doesn't just shape his ambition. It shapes the stability, clarity, and vision he brings into every relationship and environment. When a man expands his thinking, he expands the life he is able to build, because a mindset rooted in possibility unlocks paths he once assumed were out of reach. Big goals have a way of forcing a man to rise above the habits that keep him average, because the size of the target dictates the quality of the behavior. When a man commits to something larger than his current capacity, he naturally upgrades his discipline, his focus, and his sense of responsibility. He wakes up earlier, thinks more strategically, and moves with intention rather than impulse. Big goals stretch a man into someone he has not yet become, demanding behaviors that small ambitions could never require. The pursuit itself reshapes him long before the achievement ever arrives. From a woman's perspective, a man with big goals is easier to understand because his actions start to align with a clear direction. Women often look for congruence. Does his behavior match his ambition? And does his ambition match the future he talks about? When a man sets a goal that truly matters to him, his behaviors shift in ways that signal purpose. His priorities sharpen, his boundaries strengthen, and his energy becomes more grounded. He becomes someone who doesn't just chase outcomes, but embodies the character needed to reach them. Big goals change how a man moves, how he leads, and how he shows up in the world, because they demand that he steps into the version of himself capable of achieving them. Belief becomes a strategic advantage the moment a man understands it is not an emotion he waits for, but a decision he chooses to stand in. Men often assume confidence appears only after success, but in reality, belief is the foundation that enables action long before there is evidence. A man who treats belief as strategy behaves differently. He prepares more consistently. He endures setbacks with greater resilience, and he takes ownership of his direction. He doesn't rely on motivation. He relies on conviction. He relies on conviction. Belief becomes the internal architecture that supports bold action when logic tries to talk him out of it. From a woman's perspective, a man's belief system is often the clearest indicator of how he will handle pressure, uncertainty, and responsibility. Women pay attention to whether a man anchors himself in possibility or collapses into doubt when the situation demands strength. They observe how he speaks about his dreams, how he responds to challenges, and whether he stands firm in his values when things become difficult. When a man treats belief as a strategy, he signals reliability, vision, and emotional grounding. His belief doesn't make him perfect, it makes him intentional. It shapes how he leads, how he loves, and how he navigates a world that constantly tests his resolve. Small thinking quietly drains a man's potential because it convinces him to settle for a life that costs far more than he realizes. Men often underestimate how limiting beliefs accumulate like hidden fees, missed opportunities, unexplored strengths, and dreams abandoned before they ever had a chance. When a man thinks small, he protects his comfort at the expense of his capacity. He accepts less, not because he lacks ambition, but because he fears the discomfort required to pursue something greater. The real price of thinking small is paid in regret, in unused talent, and in the silent frustration of knowing he could have been more. Dreaming big, however, compounds its returns because it forces a man to grow into someone capable of creating value far beyond what he imagined. Men who dream big naturally develop resilience, clarity, and a stronger sense of identity because their goals demand it. They think in terms of legacy rather than survival, direction rather than distraction, and purpose rather than convenience. Big dreams energize a man's actions and turn ordinary effort into meaningful progress. From a woman's perspective, the contrast between small thinking and big dreaming is unmistakable. Women, notice when a man is shrinking himself to avoid failure, and they notice when he is expanding himself to build a future. They can sense whether he moves from fear or from vision whether he settles or aspires, whether he is defined by his limitations or by his willingness to challenge them. When a man chooses to dream big, he becomes more than ambitious. He becomes someone who inspires trust, respect, and belief in what is possible. Action becomes the defining moment of transformation because a man's future is shaped not by what he hopes for, but by what he chooses to do right now. Men often fall into the trap of waiting for clarity, waiting for confidence, or waiting for the perfect moment that never arrives. This hesitation feels responsible on the surface, yet underneath it is fear disguised as preparation. The longer a man waits, the heavier his unrealized potential becomes. Acting today interrupts that cycle. It signals to the mind that the future is not a distant concept. It is something being built in real time through choices made in the present. Urgency is a powerful psychological trigger for men because it challenges the deeply ingrained expectation to always stay in control. Men are often taught to gather more information, think things through, and avoid mistakes at all costs. But the paradox is clear. Overthinking steals more time than any mistake ever will. Taking action today is not about reckless speed. It is about refusing to negotiate with procrastination. When a man steps forward, even imperfectly, he creates momentum that reshapes both his confidence and his identity. From a woman's perspective, a man's willingness to act is one of the clearest indicators of his maturity and direction. Women observe how decisiveness reflects character, whether he follows through, whether he shows initiative, and whether his actions match the future he talks about. They see and sense the difference between a man who waits for life to happen to him and a man who takes responsibility for shaping it. Action communicates strength, not because it always leads to instant success, but because it reveals a man who values progress over excuses. When he chooses to act today, he becomes someone who moves with purpose, someone who honors his potential, and someone who understands that the future rewards those who refuse to let the moment slip away.